The goals for this module are to create a log entry class. Now this will have properties for the data that we're going to log. We're not going to just create one big long string anymore. We're actually going to break everything up into properties. We're going to create a log publisher class that will be a base class for all of our log publishers, such as Council, Local Storage, and the Web API. We're going to create the first one of these, Log to Council class, and inherit from that base log publisher class. Then we're going to create a log publishers service. Now this service is going to be responsible for building the list of publishers that we give to the log service. So let's get started.
तो सुन अगर वो देखे तो मारना, अगर एक भी बच जाएगी तो तुम्हारा हालत खराब कर देगी.
So we've already created the log service. Let's now focus on creating this log entry class. Now the log entry class is going to have several properties. It's going to have the entry date. That's the date that we're creating this log entry. It's going to have the message that you pass in. It's also going to keep track of the log level that we're going to record this. So what kind of log is it? We're also going to pass in that parameter array of information, and we'll put it into this extra info property, and whether or not we're going to log this data with a date. Now that's going to come into play when we build this build log string method. This is going to build up a string just like we did before in that log service, but we're now going to build it in here inside of this class using the properties that are set in this class. We're going to take the format params method that we created in the log service, and we're going to put it into this log entry class now. So we're just going to refactor things a little bit here. So let's create our log entry class. We're going to create our build log string method and the format params method. Open log service.ts, and above your log service, create a new class called log entry. And it's inside of here, we're going to create some public properties. And the first one will be the entry date. Make it type date, and let's go ahead and assign it to today's date and time. We also need the message, and that's the one that we're going to pass in. And we're going to need the level, so make it of the type log level. And let's go ahead and assign that to log level.debug or all, whatever you want to default it to as a default is just fine. We're also going to need extra info. That's going to be in any array. Remember, we're going to get that from that optional parameter array that we're passing into those various methods. And we're also going to need a log with date. That's of the type Boolean. And I'm going to go ahead and default it to true. I like having a date with all of my log entries. Write the build log string method now. This is going to return a string. So let's create our string that we're going to return and return it. Now we're just going to fill in the middle part here with kind of what we did in the log service. We're going to build up this log string, but we're going to do it by grabbing the properties now contained within this log entry. So the first thing we'll do is check the log with date. And if that's set to true, then we're going to go ahead and start out by giving our string the date. Easy enough. And then we'll fill in the type, and we'll do that by indexing into our log level with this dot level, like so. And then let's go ahead and add on the message. And then let's check to see if our extra info array has any length to it. Now, if it does have some length, then we're going to want to format using those parameters. So just like we did before, in the log service, we're going to add on, and we're going to do the this.format params. Now, we haven't written this yet. We're going to go ahead and steal this in just a second. So to steal this, we're just going to go down to the log service. We're going to locate that format params, and we're going to cut it out of here and place it into our log entry class. So no other changes are needed for this. All we have to do is move it up here, and now we have the ability to return a string that's based on all of the different log entry properties that we have here. All we have to do now is rewrite the write to log method down here in our log service. So go down to the log service class, locate the write to log. Now all of this is going to change. So go ahead and remove all of that. And we're going to now create an instance of our log entry class. We'll make a new one of these. And then we fill it in with entry.message, entry.level, entry.extrainfo. And all we're doing is we're taking each of the parameters that are passed in to the write to log, and we're assigning it to our properties in our log entry class. Now let's go ahead and set the log with date by grabbing the log with date here in the log service. So finally, what are we going to log? Well, what we're going to log is the build log string method, right? The return value from that, which is the string that has all of these parameters already created and already filled in. Wonderful. Let's save our changes. Go over to our Chrome here and click on test log, and if we've done everything correctly, we should get the exact same results that we had before. The only difference is now we're using the log entry class. And that is a little bit more generic, a little bit more reusable. Plus, if we think about the future, we want to pass that log entry class. We want to serialize it and pass it to the web API at some point. So instead of just passing one string to a web API, I always like dealing with classes. So this gives us a little bit more of an object-oriented approach. So now that we've got the log service and the log entry, let's now focus on creating some different log publishers. So we're going to split out what we used to do right in the log service. We're going to split that out into separate classes now. So we're going to focus now on building the base class for each one of these, the log publisher, and we're also going to build the one to log to the console. Our abstract class called log publisher is going to have a location property. Now this location property we're going to set for when we're storing to local storage or for the web API. So it'll be the URL for the web API and the key for local storage. We won't use it for logging to the console. We're also going to create an abstract method here called log, and now it's going to accept one of these log entry objects. It's going to return an observable of Boolean. We're going to use the observable pattern. And we're also going to create an abstract method called clear that also returns observable Boolean. This clear method will actually clear out any log entries that you've made. So each of the classes that we create will inherit from this guy. Well, that means that when they inherit, they're going to say extends the log publisher. And then we need to override the log method. So we say we're going to have now a log entry coming into that. And for the console.log, we're going to simply use the entry.buildLogString and then return an observable of true. We'll also create the clear method. We'll override that one from the base class. And we'll simply do a console.clear and again return an observable of true. Let's take a look at building our log publisher class and building our log console class. add a new file here called log-publishers.ts. So it's inside of here that we're going to place several classes. The first will actually be our log publisher, that base class. Now we're going to have to import a couple of things. So we're going to import the observable from rxjs/observable. And we're going to import rxjs/add/observable/of, because we are going to use the Boolean of. And we're also going to import our log entry class from the current folder, log.service. So with the imports done, now we can start working on our abstract base class called log publisher. If you remember, the first thing we want is a location. Then we have an abstract method called log. That is our log entry. And it returns an observable Boolean. We're then going to create another abstract class called clear. No parameters for that, but it is also going to return observable of Boolean. Add our first class that extends the log publisher. So we're going to export a class called log counsel. And it's going to extend the log publisher. It's in here that we now override the methods. So we're going to override the log method by specifying that we have a log entry object coming in. And it's going to return an observable Boolean. Inside of here then, we're going to go ahead and log to the console. So we can simply say console.log record.buildLogString. Remember, that's our method that we wrote earlier. So we're taking the variable name and specifying that that's what we're going to do. And then we return an observable of true. There we go, pretty simple. Now you notice that we still have the squiggly here. That means that we have not done something yet. We haven't implemented an abstract member, and it tells us right there that the member is called clear. Okay, no big deal. We can go ahead and create that guy. It also returns our observable Boolean, like so. Now for the console, we actually can use the clear, and that'll actually clear the console window. And then again, just like we did up here, we can return an observable of true. And we now have, basically satisfied the requirements for inheriting from the log publisher and creating our log counsel class. We're now going to build a log publisher's service. Now this service, his whole job is to create a list of log publishers. So an array of log publishers. That'll be the counsel class that we just created, the local storage that we're going to create in the web API classes that all inherit from log publisher. We're going to create all of those inside of this log publisher service, and we'll give it to the log service class. We're going to create this array. We're going to create a build publishers method inside of this log publishers service that gets called from the constructor of this service. And this build publishers, his whole job is to create a list of log publisher objects. To start out, we're just going to hard code each one in, but eventually we'll read them from a JSON file. It then will copy the publishers array over to the log service class, so it knows then which of the publishers it should loop through and call its log method whenever we're ready to do logging. This will give us the ability to log to one or more places whenever we want to log our data. Let's take a look at building our log publishers service, and then we're going to modify the log service to use the array from this class. In the shared folder, let's add another new file. This one, log publishers.service.ts. And again, since this is a service, we want to bring the injectable class in, and that's again under Angular core. And we're also going to import the log publisher, log counsel. So our two classes that we just created from the local directory log-publishers file. Create our injectable, export the class, log publishers service. We want a constructor on this because our constructor is going to call another method we're going to create called build publishers. There's no return value from this. So in our constructor, we want to say this dot build publishers. We need another property, publishers property, that is of the type log publisher array. And we'll go ahead and create it as an empty array for right now. This is what's going to be built up in our build publishers method. Eventually we're going to read the information out of a file, but for now we're going to create an instance of the log counsel class. This .publishers .push new log counsel, and we now have one entry in our publishers array that we can now give this array of information to our log service, and it now knows that it can use this one. So the log service will eventually loop through each of these publishers to figure out who it needs to log to. And this way we're going to have the ability to log to one or many places. Now that we've created this service, of course we do need to register it now in our app module. So let's go ahead and import the log publishers service from shared log-publishers.service. And since this is a service, we need to put it under the providers. Class. What we're going to do is add a couple of imports up here. So let's import now the log publisher. That's our base class, if you remember. From our log publishers. And let's also import the log publishers service from log-publishers.service. We're going to add in our log service another public property. So let's put them all under one place here. And this one will be called publishers, just like we did before. And it's going to be of the type log publisher, an array of those. Let's now add a constructor to our log service here, and we'll pass in our log publishers. So we'll pass in our publishers service, log publishers service. So our service is going to get injected by Angular into here, and I've given it a name called publishers service. Now, all we really need to do with this is set all the publishers into the local array. So we type in this dot publishers. Now normally with an array we would push. However, since this array is exactly the same as the array coming from the publisher service, we can now say this dot publishers service dot publishers. And we can take that value and we can assign it now back to the original publishers. So what we have now is in the log service, we have the constructor setting our publishers array here. Now, what we need to do down here in the write to log, right here, so where we've got this log the value, we're going to change this now. And we're going to say log the value to all publishers. So we're getting rid of the hard-coded console.log here, and instead, we're going to loop through. So let logger of this dot publishers, and then we're going to do a logger.log. And what we do is we pass in the entry, right? That's our log entry object. So we're going to pass it to each one of these. Now remember that the log method here, as part of our base class, returns an observable .boolean. So that means that we need to subscribe to this. And of course we'll get a response. And all we're going to do is console.log the response. So we should be able to see that a true value gets returned, or a false value if something didn't work when we were logging. But this is actually what is now going to call each of the publishers. Now we only have one right now, but we're setting ourselves up for creating the log to local storage and the log to the web API and adding those now in just one place. And our log service now never needs to change again. All we need to do now is just add new log publishers and it will get published. So if I've done everything correctly, I should be able to save my changes. Should be able to go back over to Chrome, test the log, and we should still see the same exact results. Everything's being logged out. But now we have this additional true being reported back because that's what we did when we did the subscribe. All right, everything's working. We've got the console now. We've got a console class, but more importantly, we've got a truly reusable system now. We have a base class that we can create some additional loggers for. That's what we're going to do in the next couple of modules, is create some additional log publishers. In this module, we built a log entry class for recording the log data. We created a base class for publishers, and we created our first publisher, which is a log to console. We then added a log publisher service whose job it is to create each of these log publishers, and we finally modified the log service to publish to all of those log publishers that we get from the log publisher service. In the next module, we're going to create the local storage publisher, and we're going to work it into our log publishing service. I hope you'll join me for the next module. Hello everybody, Paul Sheriff here with Pluralsight. This module is building a local storage publisher. The goals for this particular module are to create our log to local storage class to be able to log entries into the local storage of our web browser. We're also going to learn how to clear values from the console and the local storage by hooking up the clear methods that we wrote in our publishers up to the log service. We're also going to see how to log an object value such as a product or customer class. And we're going to add a custom method to the local storage class to say retrieve all the values, and we'll display those then in an unordered list. Let's get started. Going back to our overall logging architecture, we're now going to build a local storage logging class that inherits from the log publisher class. That's the base class we created. That's the abstract base class. So we're going to create one that actually can store our log information now to local storage. We're going to use the built-in local storage object that Angular and JavaScript make available to us. We're going to first read from local storage anything that was written prior and create a log entry array, because what we're going to store in the local storage will be a log entry array. So we need to read any existing items first, then we append the new log entry to the array, and finally we then store the complete array with the new value back into local storage. Let's take a look at building our log local storage class. Open the log publisher.ts file, and let's create another class called log local storage. This is going to extend the log publisher, just like we did before. Now we're going to add a constructor because we need to do a little bit of work to initialize this class. Anytime you have a derived class and you have a constructor, you need to call super to have it invoke the constructor of the base class. Next, we're going to set the location. Now, the location for local storage is going to be a key name. So I'm just going to call it logging as the key name here. Now, you'll notice we have a couple of squiggles here. It says that we have not basically implemented the clear or the log methods. So let's go ahead and grab these guys from up here, and we'll copy them, and we'll paste them down into here. Get rid of abstract on both of these, and then add the method body here. Let's go ahead and in the log, let's create our return value here, and let's default it to false. Then we can return an observable of that variable. Now we'll set that to true if everything gets recorded correctly, otherwise we will return a false if something doesn't get recorded correctly. For the clear, there's really nothing to do other than let's return an observable of true. Now we got rid of all that. We're now ready to start building the body of each of these methods. Let's start building the log. Now, one of the things we mentioned in the slides is that we're going to read in the array of log entries from local storage and see if any exist. So we're going to start out just creating a variable here called values. Let's go ahead and create a try catch here. And in the try portion is where we're going to start. Let's set values equal to json.parse. We're going to use local storage. This is the object that's built into Angular and JavaScript, of course. And we're going to call its getItem method. Now what it needs is the key. Well, as I mentioned, the key is this .location. Now here's the problem. If we don't find anything, because it's the first time you've run this application, we need to return something other than a null. So I'll take the results of all of this, and if it's null, then we'll return an empty array. Now all we have to do is add a new log entry to the array. So values.push, and we grab the record here that comes in, and we push that onto our array. Next, store the complete array into local storage. Again, you don't have to write all the comments if you don't want to. I like doing it just because it reminds me what I'm doing. On local storage, to save something, we're going to call the set item. We give it the key name again, and then what we want to store. Well, in this case, we want to stringify our array of log entries. If something goes wrong, let's go ahead and just log the exception to the console window.